Hi, welcome to another dose of virtual vitamin Z. My name is Stephen, and I'm the curator of Humane Education for the Detroit Zoological Society. Today, I'd like to start off with a game. And that game is called Two Truths and a Lie. And if you aren't familiar with it, the way that you play it is that I am going to say 3 facts, and 2 of those facts are truths, and 1 of them is a lie. And your job is to decide which 2 are true and which 1 is false. And if you have an answer, I'll give you a chance to add it in the comments section before I tell you what the answers are. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, truth or lie? Horses can communicate through up to 17 discrete facial expressions. Second, honeybees can communicate the direction and distance to a flower patch through a waggle dance. Third, acacia trees can communicate that a giraffe is feeding on them so nearby trees can protect themselves. So, oops, I meant to say 7, sorry. So the first one, horses can communicate through up to 7 discrete facial expressions. Second, honeybees can communicate the direction and distance to a flower patch through a waggle dance. And third, acacia trees can communicate that a giraffe is feeding on them so nearby trees can protect themselves. Which one do you think is the lie and which 2 do you think are true? All right, so to get started, it is true that acacia trees can communicate that a giraffe is feeding on them so nearby trees can protect themselves. And the way that that works is that as giraffes start eating the leaves of one tree, that tree starts to produce a toxin in those leaves that makes it bitter, but it also releases a gas that will be sensed by other trees, and they will also start producing that toxin. And that's a way to protect themselves. The honeybee is, the statement about the honeybees is also true. Honeybees can communicate the direction and distance to a flower patch through what's called a waggle dance. And here's a video of that dance. So focus on this bee in the center. And you can see that he's moving around in a figure 8. And he's also waggling. And the distance that he moves is relative to the distance that the flower patch is away. So there's a relationship between those 2. And then the angle that he starts the dance from relative to the beehive indicates the direction relative to the beehive that the bees would have to fly to find that flower patch. So that's true. The lie is that horses can communicate through up to 7 discrete facial expressions. But the truth is, they can actually communicate through 17 discrete facial expressions, which is fewer than humans, but more than chimpanzees, to put that into a little bit of perspective. All right, so this week during my virtual vitamin Z lessons, I've been talking about animal communication. And if you tuned in earlier in the week, I talked about how prairie dogs have a really advanced form of communication that some people have argued is its own language. And then I talked about how we can start listening in and understanding some of the things that animals are saying by using the examples of American robins and eastern gray squirrels. Today, I'm going to bring that all together and talk about how we can use our ability to understand animals, as well as our recognition that animals do have these advanced lives, communicative lives, to be a voice for them when they can't be a voice for themselves. And to start, we'll review some terms. Communication refers to the exchange of meaning between 2 individuals or more. Language is a specific form of communication that has certain characteristics, like being symbolic. What that means is that a word doesn't have to sound or look like what it represents for it to have meaning. So for example, the word horse doesn't look like a horse, it doesn't sound like a horse, but we know that it means horse. And animals communication systems can have that ability too. Third word is reverence, and that's a sense of awe or wonder. Empathy refers to our ability to understand the perspectives of others, including other animals. And then finally, intrinsic value refers to value, or, that something matters just because it exists. For example, an animal has intrinsic value just because they exist, regardless of what they look like or anything like that. The new terms we're going to be talking about are anthropomorphism, critical anthropomorphism, individual level action, and community level action. So let's get started with anthropomorphism. You might have heard this term before, and it refers to giving human characteristics to other animals. And you can see an example of that here. This is a cartoon of a dachshund, and the dachshund is standing up on his hind legs, and he's using his front legs like humans would use their hands. He's cooking some soup, it looks like, and he's wearing clothing too. And so in this case, we've put human characteristics like wearing clothing, standing up on two legs. You can also see that he's smiling. Now, there's a debate over whether anthropomorphism is good or bad. And one way of thinking about it is that it's a tool, and it's not on its own good or bad, but it can be used in helpful or harmful ways. And a harmful way to use anthropomorphism might be to assume that animals like dogs are just like people. And the reason that can be harmful is that you might then assume, if dogs are just like people, they must love human food. It must be good for them. And then we might feed them something that would make them sick. But anthropomorphism doesn't have to be used in a harmful way. We can also use it in a helpful way, and that's called critical anthropomorphism. And let's take a look now at this photograph of a dog. We can see that this dog has his tongue out, and the corner of his mouth are kind of arched up. And if we weren't critical, we might say, oh, this dog is happy. Look, he's smiling, because dogs smile just like humans do. But critical anthropomorphism is using our understandings of animals and our ability to think critically to make hypotheses about their perspectives. So you may not know this, but dogs don't regulate their body temperature the same way that humans do. Humans sweat to cool down, dogs pant. So if we see a dog with his tongue out like this, we can know that that dog is trying to cool down. And so using critical anthropomorphism, we can make the hypothesis that this dog is overheating. He might be uncomfortable. That's not to say that, he might not also be happy. It could be that he just had a good workout. But we can use that hypothesis that he needs to cool down to determine our behavior and what, the actions we take to help him. And so that leads me to our action for today. Our action is that we're going to be a voice for animals. And by taking this action, we're going to strengthen our empathy, because one of the best ways to strengthen empathy is to practice it. We're also going to be strengthening our creativity. And then we're also going to help animals and the environment. And the supplies we'll need are, to get started, just a computer with internet access and a paper and pencil. And here are the steps that we're going to follow, and I'll give you an example of what these might look like. So first of all, we're going to identify an animal whose voice is not being heard. And then we're going to use that critical anthropomorphism, again, our understanding of that animal and our critical thinking, to make a hypothesis about that animal's perspective, what they would say if they had a voice. And then we're going to be that animal's voice by taking an individual level action and then a community level action. So an individual level action refers to an action in which we change our own behavior. So maybe we start recycling. That would be an individual level action, recycling in our homes. A community level action is an action in which we work to change our community's behavior. So maybe if your community doesn't have a recycling program, then you can write letters to encourage your community to start a recycling program. So what might this look like with animals? So let's imagine an example. Let's imagine that you're walking to the store, and as you're walking past the parking lot, you see this dog in a car on his own. How can you be a voice for this dog? Well, the first step is identify an animal whose voice isn't being heard. So, let's say that there's no one else around. He can't tell anybody what he's feeling, so we have to be a voice for him. And now let's use critical anthropomorphism to make a hypothesis about that animal's perspective. Let's say it's an 80-degree day. We know that cars heat up. We know that dogs, have fur. And so we might think, this dog, he might not be panting right now, but if he stays in here much longer, he might start panting. He might start overheating. We need to do something to help. So what can we do? Well, first of all, we can be in that animal's voice by taking an individual level action. And in this case, what do you think some examples of an individual level action are? One thing we might do is if we see this dog's human, we might say, hey, hold up a sec, you shouldn't leave your dog in the car like that. He could get really sick or even die. If we don't see that dog's human, then maybe we call the police and let them report the situation and let them come and help out. But we can also take actions at the community level. And one of the ways we can do this is by educating other people about how harmful being in a car can be to dogs, being left in a car can be to dogs. They might not know, and being a humane educator like that might be really helpful. We can also encourage our communities to put up signs or to make laws to help dogs. And that photograph is actually part of one of these actions. There's this organization called My Dog is Cool. It's taken a minute to load, but here it comes. It is an organization that's committed to being a voice for animals who have been left in hot vehicles. And they have resources that help us help those dogs and be a voice for those dogs. And so there are all of these different steps we can take or actions we can take to help them at the individual and community levels. And the really cool thing about this is that it's an opportunity to be creative. Maybe you're a really strong writer, so you can be a voice for dogs or other animals through your writing. Or maybe you're a really great public speaker, so you can be a voice for them through public speaking. Or maybe you're very creative and you're very artistic. You can use art to be a voice for them. And that leads me to the Detroit Zoological Society and our Berman Academy for Humane Education, which is a one-of-a-kind humane education initiative that's allowed us to incorporate the principles of humane education into all of our education programs. And those are summed up by our mission of helping people help animals. So I hope that you've learned a little bit more this week about animal communication, and today especially how you can be a voice for animals who otherwise wouldn't have a voice. If you're interested in more virtual vitamin Z, be sure to check out our website at detroitzoo.org and click on the educational lessons link. Until then, stay safe and have a great day. Bye.